2.
What is up, everyone? This is the next edition of Rip City Real Talk. Craig Moshko and Anthony Blaylock here to recap the last week's worth of games. Lots of stuff to cover today. Multiple injuries, 3-1 record in the week, which we're always happy every time we come on this show. We like to say, first and foremost, you can win the week. You're doing pretty good on the season. 3-1, good way to win the week. So lots of positivity to talk about. Obviously, some negatives as well, but we're pretty excited. We're in the middle of a good home stretch. We have a pretty easy schedule upcoming, and we're taking care of the easier games for the most part. So, yeah, lots to discuss.
Definitely feeling good. Kind of a tough week with some injury stuff, and we'll cover that in the pod. But I think overall, Blazerland is a lot more positive than we were last week. So,
right, yeah, beating bad teams makes you feel pretty good.
Absolutely. So something new on the podcast that we want to start with, we're going to recap the games and we're going to talk about injuries, but something new we want to do is we want to do a new segment called Shouts and Pouts. And it's real simple. It's just 2 things we like and don't like from each one of us right now and what we're seeing with the team. So it's not an in-depth recap. It's just gonna be a real quick couple of things. Why don't you give us one of each of yours, Anth?
Yeah, so shout CJ McCollum's early season play. Love it. Love to see it. He's playing an all-star caliber level right now. We've needed this to pair next to Dame. This is the CJ that for a long time people didn't really want to keep on the team. He wasn't starting off very good. We said he's an asset we could trade, and now he's looking like a bona fide all-star, at least the numbers that he's putting up. So super shout there. Nice. And my number one pout, getting down. All these games is 16 plus every single game this week. We were down by at least 16. So counting on that, getting behind early and having to fight and claw our way back, which is not ideal against better teams.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had Dame and CJ both for assisting. I feel like we've seen more playmaking this year out of both guards, which is great to see. Dame's always been able to do it, but I think CJ's doing it very consistently. He's only has 1 turnover per game, which is pretty good for a guard. And then my biggest pout right now is defensive rotations. I don't feel like the defensive rotations are strong, and that's sometimes leading to those 16 and 18-point deficits we've been falling into. I don't feel like the defense is all there yet, but I think we can cover that in the pod.
Yeah, perfect. For my second shout, I want to say on the opposite of getting down by 16 is the team's resilience in the fight to come back from 16-point losses in the first half. And it's great to see him fight back and continue to fight. A lot of teams, without fans especially, to be able to keep that energy up and to fight back and claw your way back into games. We'll shout along with that pout. And my second pout has been as defensive rotations for you. It's interior defense for me. We already know perimeter defense is consistently an issue with the Blazers. The one thing you would hope to see a little bit more of with our length is stopping guys in the paint. And I'm seeing a lot of fouls being called. Nurkic is not becoming the presence that we needed. A lot of guys tend to group up in the middle to try to stop these drives. They don't do a good job of it, and that's where you see the ball get kicked out and moved around to result in a lot of open threes. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that. But, I to say the defense and all is an issue.
Absolutely. So my second shot's a little smaller, and it's something that you probably don't notice a lot during the game, but Derek Jones' cutting has been awesome. He has looked much more wide open on offense. He's starting to figure out a role, and he's starting to carve out these lob dunks, and I think that that's going to be something we see consistently through the rest of the year. So that's Derek Jones' cutting. Next pout, we talked about this the other night. We actually spent a long time talking about this. Rodney Hood doesn't look right. And if we are going to pay him $9 million a year and he's going to be our 7th guy off the bench, we kind of need a little more from Hoodie. So I'm hoping it's just injury stuff. He looked a little bit better in that game last night, but he just doesn't look right. It looks like there's something else going on still. So.
Right. And as we get into the injuries and how the rotations are going to work, he's going to become an even more important piece. And we'll talk about that a little bit here. But I want to start with the Toronto game. What a way to start the week, man. It was quite a game. Records aside, you talk about them coming in 2-6, and this is a team that won the championship 2 years ago. And they're not a 2-6 caliber team. They still got Siakam and Lowry and Van Vliet and you name it. They have a good deep bench, a lot of guys that can defend, and they have a lot of length, and they can score and shoot the three better than anybody. We talked about how they attempt more threes than anybody else in the league at 42.3. They're actually tied with us going into the game at 42.3 attempts a game. When you talk about perimeter defense and how that can affect us, quite a game to go into and win in the fashion that we won in.
Yeah, it was nice, and the team just felt resilient that game. We were really close that whole game, and they're one of those tough teams that they can defend all 5 positions really well. They have great defenders, and I felt like we played well. The home court advantage thing wasn't strong because obviously they're kind of a vet team, so they don't really care. But you just saw the Blazers kind of it looked like a good team win. It looked like we really meshed together. We started to figure some rotations out. That was a great way to start the week, and I was really uplifted by that win. Records aside, I agree. I think that team's a lot better than 2-8 or whatever they are right now.
Well, right. I mean, to come out and get down by, again, we talk about that 16-point number. I was happy for the bit. Get down by 16, and you continue to fight. They were just killing us from the 3-point line. I mean, just absolutely dominating us. Looked like they couldn't miss. I think Lowry came out and got 3 straight threes. It was ridiculous. I mean, again, we talked about the perimeter defense. We were worried about it going in there, and it looked like that was going to be the downfall of the team early. And then we started shooting threes and hitting them, and that was the biggest thing to me. I saw a lot of issues with the interior paint. Again, we saw Siakam just continue to destroy Rocco one-on-one till the end. But early, it looked like, wow, this is what we brought him in to do, is to stop these types of forwards and these types of guys. He's getting dominated. And then you throw in the 3-point shooting that they're hitting, and it just looked like a recipe for disaster. And you were kind of bummed out because it's a 2-16. We talk about their record not being where their team is probably overall, but it still sucked to see. It's like you want to come into these types of games and be competitive, and early it did not look great until the second half.
Yep, I agree. I don't know what's going on with these big leads we're giving up, but I think perimeter defense. I think other teams tend to shoot well from 3 against us. They go on runs, and then if we can shoot well in the second half, we'll come back. But it's been tough this week watching that stuff.
Right, but then we talk about the second half, and this is the biggest thing. I mean, I'm going back to my shouts, I suppose, is watching CJ and the way he could take over a game and continue to destroy Van Fleet. And it all came down to that final shot that he hit, the little spin move, step back. I mean, Van Fleet almost fell, and he hits a jumper rope room to put us up with barely any time left on the clock. And to follow that up with Rocco's defense on Siakam at the end. I mean, no fouls. He knew he was going to spin. You could just see the adaptation. You could see he's learning how he likes to move. Okay, he's going to do this move. He's going to spin inside on me and try to get to the spot. And perfect defense. Forces a bad shot for Pascal Siakam, back-to-back nights. Is a back-to-back for them. Missing the game-winning potential shot to lose by one against Golden State and then us. But you love that. You love to see the energy come out in the second half and the defense really step up. That you could tell it almost felt like a playoff game. Like it was every single play. There was a sense of urgency down to the last play, and we held our own and we came back. And I love to see that from a team that really is still building its chemistry.
Absolutely. Rocco was really good defensively in the second half. He was really good those last few possessions. He was going straight up like this, and it's kind of astonishing sometimes having a defender that good, because as a Blazer fan, we're always on the edge of our seat, right? We're always worried that somebody's going to switch and break down our defense. CJ's been friskier on defense than I think people give him credit for. He's averaging 1.5 steals per game right now. So I honestly think that we're turning a corner in a way. Most of the games this week were lower scoring, but we also play teams that tend to score a little lower and play tougher defense this week. So, and we'll talk more about that as we go. But I liked the Toronto game. I thought the Blazers showed a lot of heart in that game.
We needed it. It was the first game all year, I really felt. I mean, the Laker game was right there, but to me, coming down to the last shot, the adrenaline after the game, we were talking about it. We kind of messaged each other afterwards, and it was like, wow, we felt that like that was the game as a Blazer fan. You're like, that looked good. That was the team basketball. This is what we're capable of. This is what you want to see against the better teams going forward. So it was a great win, and just started our week off hot. You felt really good about going into the week, and you have some weaker teams coming up, or so you thought. Yeah. And it was just a good way to get that kicked off. And then we moved to Sacramento. Yeah,
Sacramento's a weird team because their players can get hot, and that we've already talked about. We don't like the matchup with them because they run a lot, and that running really makes us look kind of crummy on defense. So we've talked about them a couple times, and kind of a similar story. First half, we started off a little slow. We weren't hitting shots. The defense looked lackadaisical at times, and then all of a sudden in the second half, we flipped the switch. It's very similar, and it's what's happened a lot this year. I don't know what changed in that game, and I don't know why that keeps happening. But I do think that it's something that the guys are going to be talking about in the locker room and how they can fix these problems. Because the first half we tend to come out not flat, but we just don't look like we're all there.
No, we got down by what, 20 points in the first half. Then we
Yeah.
fought back a little bit. And in the second half, you got down by 16 again. And then you fought back again
Yeah.
to win the game. And again, you talk about playing a team so close to each other after you just played them. So that was the second time we played the Kings in 3 games.
Yep.
And you talk about those adaptions that are going to be made, that chess game that happens in any sport, really, any kind of competition. The first game, we blew them out. And it was fun. It was like, oh wow, this team's pathetic. They're terrible. We're gonna have our way with them. And then they kind of learned how to play us. They learned what's going to work for them. They learned how to rotate and where to move the ball. And then we saw it in full effect by hitting all the threes that they hit early.
Mhm.
And yeah, again, talking about pace, De'Aaron Fox, probably the fastest guy in the league. When he gets ahead of steam, he gets going downhill, either foul him or you're giving up a layup. So he's tricky to guard. They actually came into the league 8th in offense. So they're not a bad scoring team. They were a top 10 offensive team as far as points per game. But on the flip side of that, they were dead last, 30th in league on defensive rating.
Yeah.
So you kind of have a weird team there where you look at their squad and like, wow, they don't have anybody that can defend. I mean, Holmes is a good defender, respectively, for a big guy. Whiteside's shot blocker.
Right.
Not great on defense, but creates a presence in the paint. But other than that, I mean, Harrison Barnes and Fox and Hield and all of their stars, they're not out there lockdown defense. Like, they're not going to go shut Dame and CJ out. And that, I think, is what allowed us to claw back in. The faster they played, the faster we got the ball back when they started missing shots, and it allowed us to get back in that game over and over. You feel like if that they would have slowed down and really played a little more of a half-court game and kind of took their time and found good-looking shots, they would have just put us away, and they never gave us a chance to go completely into the dirt. So, I mean, that's what happens when you're going to play these teams. They're young, they're fast, but they can't defend. And it was great to see us, again, continue to fight, because you have to understand that situation. Their pace is so quick. You're going to get a lot of opportunities. If you can just string some stops together, the clock is going to be your friend. You just got to go get good looks and start hitting shots. And they did in each particular half, and finally came away to win the fourth quarter.
Yep. Perks of being a veteran team, right? And a team that's been around the block a lot is these guys, we fall down by 15 to 20 and we just doesn't really seem to phase us against certain teams. If you fall down 20 to Utah or Denver, they're going to close you out because they have those really good wing defenders. Right. And we struggle to come back. So I don't feel as bad when it happens against the Kings. But when we move into this next game, unless you have more on the Kings, when we move into the Pacers are one of the scariest teams to me, and here's why. They have these great guards that can defend really well. I mean, you look at Brogdon, and he's just a total disruptor. I don't like those games, and I always feel more nervous going into a strong defensive game than I do a shootout. I don't get scared of Houston or stuff like that. So we go into this Pacers game, and I was nervous the whole game, the whole time, because I was hoping our bigs could beat their bigs, and that's a big ask.
And they have 2 all-star caliber bigs. I mean, we talked about on the page going into the game what Miles Turner brings to them. He's the league leader in block shots. He can hit the 3, and so can Sabonis. They both can step out, which already hurts you when you're trying to play defense, because it makes you have to come out to them. And when you have to come out on Sabonis, it allows him to start doing a lot of his post-up work from a little higher up, and then they both can pass. It's going to be a tough issue for us. We're going to talk about why going forward, but you're right. You pair that with the guards, the Holidays, and Brogdon. It's tough to get behind a team like that, because they can score consistently enough. And once they get up on you, if you can't score the ball versus that defense, they start going low and they start controlling the game in the paint and rebounding the ball, and they put you away. And they did. We ended up going by 16 plus, and you fought the entire game. It was still good to see them try to come back. They didn't really give up, but they got tired. I just think second night of a back-to-back, the first back-to-back of the season.
Yes.
You look at it, especially early, the legs just didn't look there. There were a lot of open threes, which we're not a team that really misses too many open threes with the guys that we have there. And everybody seemed to have that same lift. I think they got a little more energized as they got back into the game, and momentum starts coming in. Guys get that adrenaline kick, but it runs out, and it ran out at the end of that game. And that's just a tough physical team to play to come into a back-to-back and not be able to hit your 3-point shot.
Definitely. And, they're a team that's going to compete every single night. They're really tough. They have a lot of solid guys up and down the lineup. Sabonis is kind of a tough matchup. I thought Nurk did really well against him. And then it happened. Nurk hit his hand, or what do you do? He fractured his wrist?
Broke his wrist, yeah.
Broke his wrist. So now he had surgery. They're saying 8 weeks. I think with Nurk, it's kind of one of those deals that it's just bad luck. It's not like he's injury prone. The guy, he just hit it's just a weird play. That's all.
All right. And all that did was continue to hurt our rebounding. We lost a lot of rebounds. We gave up too many offensive rebounds in that game.
Yeah.
That's just, again, we talk about a physical team like that and you're already down. It makes it too much to come back from. But we're not mad. They came in, 7-4 like us. So
yes.
They're a good team in the East right now. It's nothing to get too upset about losing to. They have a lot of depth. It's a tough game, one you like to see, but at the same time, you can forgive them for losing, considering they lost Nurk, and it just wasn't a good game to start with, and they looked tired. They're just working on that conditioning.
Yep.
So then we go to Atlanta. Another tough game. Again, getting by 16 and fighting and clawing our way back. And when I saw one of the most physical games so far of the year, I mean, good grief, that guy who runs the ice baths is going to have his work cut out for him.
Yeah, it was physical. There was a lot of hammering each other, and there was very few calls. The refs just let them play, and sometimes the players get upset with that. You could see some of the guards were trying to draw fouls, and they were getting a little upset with the refs, but they were consistent. They let them play. The big guys were doing a lot. Their bigs are really good. I think maybe like a casual fan doesn't know this, but their bigs are awesome. Capella, we love Capella, and we think John Collins is a great power forward. Maybe not like all-star caliber guys, but really, really good bigs. And we played them super tough without Nurk.
Right. Yeah, we talk about Cantor. I mean, he had to step up. He started in the game. He came out with 5 blocks, 15 rebounds. He scored good double-double. I think he had 3 steals. It was great to see him hold his own, because we don't know Cantor as a defending center. He's not a defensive center. He wasn't put in to be a defensive center.
Yep.
And lucky for us, their bigs, as good as they are not super offensively threatening.
No.
I mean, Collins can get going. He's a decent shot. But Capella's a down by the rim kind of guy. He relies on rebounds and putbacks.
Yeah.
That's kind of his game, and I think that was fine for Cantor to deal with. He's not a big post scorer. But we still had to have him step up. I mean, with no Nurk coming into this game, knowing that they have Collins and Capella, I mean, it was one of those situations where we need to see him step up, because now you're the starting center. And I felt like he did. I mean, the numbers alone were great, but outside of that, in a physical game where, again, Cantor's not a small guy, but he's never been known to be able to bang and play that kind of defense, and he really held his own and kept us in that game. A lot of offensive rebounds. I think the highest amount of offensive rebounds we've had all year so far as a team. And I think,
he was great. Covington had double-digit rebounds. I think he had 11. When you look at Derek Jones, he got some really clutch rebounds and really good hustle plays. It was just a game we had to fight. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't fun to watch. It wasn't one of those games that makes your heart race. But golly, to scrape out a win against a team when, again, we had so CJ got hurt right before the half. Yeah, so CJ gets hurt before the half. You don't have your starting center in Nurk. You have all the excuses in the world. We played 4 games in 6 nights or something like that. You have all these excuses, but you come out, you punch it right back. Dame played really well. Derek Jones Jr. had his best game as a Blazer, and Covington's defense was once again very solid. Like we don't complain about Covington's defense almost ever. It's just super solid.
Right. And in games like that, those physical games, this is where you want to see your defense step up in that length. And these guys that you brought in to do this exact thing, and they executed. And it comes down to the end. I mean, the offensive rebound straight into that game to.
So there's someone we haven't mentioned on the pod yet.
Really, you just love to see it.
So Melo actually had a fabulous week. He closed 2 games for us and basically won us 2 of these 3 games that we're talking about. I think
the Toronto game, he came out, I think it was 2 of 8 or 2 of 9. He was shooting terrible. You could already see the Twitter feeds, all the Blazer media. Melo, he's got to get out of the game. Why is Melo in there? Oh, no. And then he comes out and all he does is just absolutely scorch in the fourth quarter, shooting 55% of his threes right now in the fourth quarter. And he got a couple of those buckets. He didn't get the game winner. Congrats to CJ. Without him in there, you're not making that comeback. He drew some out. He's hitting his threes when he needs to.
It's a good point. We didn't really touch on it too much, but I think he did more of what we want to see, which is A, shooting over people, and B, shooting threes. We want him to do a little more spot up shooting, and I think he found a little bit of a rhythm this week. He did do a little bit of back to the basket stuff, but it wasn't like crazy ball dominant.
No, and he's going to have to step up now because
yeah,
going forward, we don't have Cantor and we don't have probably Gary Trent now in the backup units. They're both going to have to start. That's one of the big things we're going to talk about is how these rotations are going to work.
Yeah.
What we're going to see out of guys like Giles, and as you touched base in your pout, what's going to happen with Rodney Hood. So that's kind of the next thing I transition to as we talk about these games. And we've had a couple injuries, a bunch of close wins, come from behind wins. Great to see. But more so now, how this is going to affect us going forward with we don't know what's happening with CJ, right? He's getting an MRI. I haven't seen the results of the MRI yet. So we don't know how severe his foot sprain is. I don't think it's that bad since he played through it. I think if anything, it's going to be more precautionary, a couple games, maybe a week or two at most, but we'll have to see. Either way, we expect that Trent's going to continue to start now. He's going to come out there with the starting unit, and Cantor's going to now be our starting center, as we saw going into the Atlanta game.
Absolutely.
So
okay, so I actually don't hate this, and here's why. I think that the Melo Cantor pairing in the second unit was really negative in the plus minus, which means that when they're on the floor, we're losing typically. I think when you're talking about Cantor in the starting unit lineup, I love that because Dame and CJ shoot a lot and he gets a lot of offensive rebounds. So I kind of like that. What I'm kind of nervous about the most is Melo in the second unit with Rodney. If which one of them tries to get hot, who's shooting, and then defensively, I have concerns for sure. Because now we're talking about Giles is going to play meaningful minutes, and Giles is not a great defender. So do you have Melo and Giles paired up? The second unit is just going to be duct tape for a while.
No, and to touch on your first point, I think you're absolutely right. I think the reason that we got our highest amount of offensive rebounds in this game against guys like Collins and Capella, who are great rebounders, is because of Cantor's ability to track balls at the rim and get those offensive rebounds. When you have a team where your primary offense is three-point shooting, especially with the starters, that's your primary offense. You're going to have a lot of those balls missed. They're going to be longer rebounds, and you have to have a guy in there that can rebound the way he can. And I mean, I don't know why Nurk isn't a better rebounder. He's a big guy. You think he could box out, create more space, and get rebounds, but he's not putting up the same types of rebounds that Cantor is. And to have him out there with the starters, I mean, there's no surprise that we did so good when we went to the Western Conference Finals a couple of years ago. He did the same thing for us. He cleans up the ball. He's the garbage man of the team. And I agree. Thinking him paired with Carmelo in the second unit with how bad that defense was, people were driving. Cantor can't stop guys in the paint. They're getting around Carmelo. Where he has to sink in and they're hitting threes because he has to make up for the fact that he can't close in on guys. So to have Carmelo out there with hopefully a more athletic big like Giles is probably going to benefit us. We're going to be a little bit quicker. And we talk about the defense we're getting back in the starting unit now with Trent, Jones, and Covington. I mean, Gary Trent's a better defender than CJ. I really like what we're going to get out of the starting unit in the defensive game now and the rebounding game. I think that's going to be a big plus for us, even with CJ obviously being a big part of our offense that we're going to be missing. I just feel like we're not going to have too big of a flow issue because Trent's going to hit a lot of threes. He's going to play good defense, and Dame's going to just have to keep being Dame.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. In the last game against Atlanta, actually Rocco and Melo were the bigs for a decent chunk of time. So you could see small ball. That's not something we typically watch a lot of in Portland because we typically have a big center, but you could see lineups where those two guys play together. The other thing is, so Rodney Hood is going to get a lot of minutes or more minutes than he has, and you're going to see Gary Trent get more minutes. I think whichever one of them gets hotter, whichever one, I mean, they're going to have a chance to earn a lot of minutes for the rest of the season, depending on how they defend and if they hit their shots. And that's just what it's going to come down to for us while CJ is out, is it's going to be those guys stepping up.
And we need to figure out what we're going to get out of Rodney Hood early because we gave him a little benefit of the doubt. He's coming off the injury. Achilles are a tough one to come back from.
Yes.
So he's coming back from it. Hasn't been asked to do much. I think with Carmelo out there on the floor, demands a lot of offense in the second unit, and really Trent kind of being that second guy to get his shot and get his threes. Rodney's he brings the ball up and he kind of looks to shoot, but he hasn't really been asked to do much. And he hasn't looked explosive. So now that kind of changes because without Gary Trent out there and again, you play Giles, whatever you're going to do, the game's going to go differently for our bench unit without being able to get the rebounds and Cantor getting the putbacks.
Yeah.
So we need Hood to start hitting shots and driving. I think he needs to orchestrate more of the offense. I don't think he's going to be look to get too many shots. I still think they're going to go through Carmelo. I really do.
Yep.
But I think he's going to bring the ball up now, and he's going to have to find guys and orchestrate and then be able to drive off of the screen. And if he can do that, I don't think we'll skip a beat on the bench.
No, we'll be fine. I'm not too worried. I think the bench will just be interesting, and it'll be fun to watch them and see how they do. Because honestly, Giles is really fun to watch. I enjoy watching him and Derek Jones when they're on the floor because they're hustle guys. They make really fun plays. But with a hustle guy, they also make terrible plays. So whenever something really, really bad happens, it's usually because, the Jake Lehman, the Pat Connaughton, those kind of hustle guys were out there. They sometimes make bad defensive rotations or whatever.
Yeah, but it's still going to be nice to see the athleticism. I mean, Giles, it's okay if he goes out and fouls and he shoves the guy. We want him to be that big body. Mm-hmm. People have been calling all year. We want to see more Giles. Oh, Cantor and Carmelo can't do it together. Here's your chance. This is
here you go.
We talked about the CJ situation and all these guys that were coming out wanting to trade CJ. We can get something back for CJ. Okay. We talked about it for years. He's our best asset. If you're going to break this entire team up, he's the building block that you're going to move to get pieces back. Yeah. He's been playing like an all-star this year. Now he's out. So now if you're a Blazers fan, granted, I know that you talk about trading CJ, you're typically getting something back. It's obviously going to make up a different type of team. But now you're going to see what we can do without him at our shooting guard position. And if we were to insert Gary Trent, as we've talked about, would be the option we have to do if we traded CJ. And so now I want to see how Trent and Dame play together. So I think Dame plays so much of that off ball when CJ gets the ball, especially after they bring Dame back in after that first rotation. Dame will bring the ball up to start the game. He'll go out, and then CJ will come back in and run the second unit. And then when they close out the first half, they'll bring Dame back in. But CJ typically handles the ball in that stretch. He still kind of takes over the point guard duties for a while. Well, now Dame's going to have the ball in his hands all the time. And we already saw in Atlanta that they double every single time they're throwing two guys at Dame because now he can just give it off to CJ. You don't have two guys that can orchestrate and drive the ball in and create plays now. Now it's just Dame. Trent's not going to do anything when he gets the ball. He's going to dribble around, try to pass it back. Yep. I can't tell how many times we saw that at the end of the Atlanta game is go to somebody, Carmelo, whoever, and they immediately try to get it back to Dame. And if Dame has an off night during this stretch without CJ, it's kind of concerning to me who else is going to be able to get that ball, who's going to be able to make plays and orchestrate.
Yeah.
Because
I think it has to be the shooters have to hit their shots if they want to relieve the pressure off of Dame, right? Like when Robert Covington, when Derek Jones, and when specifically Gary Trent get their threes or open looks, they're just going to have to hit them, take the pressure off of Dame. The other thing is we saw Ant a little bit more in the last game, and maybe you play him more because he can create his own shot and he can play make more. So maybe you just see some more Anthony Simons.
You're going to have to. He's going to have to step up because the guard play without CJ coming in and kind of taking over the second unit. The only other guard you have at this point is, unless you go Hood, it's going to be Anthony. So I agree. I think he's going to have to play more minutes. He's going to have to step up. We still need to see how bad the CJ injury is. I don't think it's going to be terrible, but we're definitely going to have a couple weeks without the two of them. And to me, I worry about the ball handling. I really do. I worry about who's going to take that ball out of Dame's hands. A lot of times they'll screen or they'll give it to Nurk and then he'll make a good pass or they'll work that pick and roll. You just don't have that. You don't have Nurk now to set those screens, and he's a great passing big, so he's already off the table. Yeah. And now you lose CJ, who's another primary handler, and I just think you're going to see him get doubled a lot. They're going to take the ball out of his hands and force somebody to beat you, which is fine if we're hitting our shots, but it also keeps a lot of guys out in that perimeter, and it's going to be harder to get open threes because you're not going to have that drive in and kick out as much. Because you don't have the screens to free up a guy like Dame or CJ to get into the lane and make that pass. So I am worried about where the offense is going to go. I'm interested to see how they do it. I think you'll see Carmelo play with the starting unit more just because I think he's a better passer. And I think if you get the ball into his hands, he can make a smart decision. He's got the intellect to be able to find an open guy, which you're going to need the passing to step up. Even if you're going to lose some of the defense, he'll probably play over a guy like Jones or Covington for stretches, and it's going to have to be because they don't give you anything offensively. As good as defenders as they are, there's going to be points where you're going to have to get the ball out of Dame's hands or try to figure out a way to get it back into his hands. It's just going to be interesting with guys that can pass.
I think you could play Melo at the 3 and then have Robert Covington play the 4 or whatever. I think Melo in the starting lineup makes a ton of sense from an offensive standpoint. People aren't going to like Cantor and Melo playing together, but sometimes you don't really have much of a choice, man. You got to put the best team out there that's going to help you win.
It gets really tricky. It's going to be very matchup dependent. I think if they have really good center, you have to get length out there, and you're going to see Cantor out closing games. If they don't have a typical post-up center, then I think you will see a lot more small lineups with Rocco and Carmelo playing together. And you put Jones at the 3, which I'm fine with. I think if you have the 2 guys playing defense, then you shouldn't be hurt too much. Carmelo can easily play center if he has to against a low post guy. If you really want to get that offense out there, and you want to take Cantor off the floor. I think with Atlanta, we kind of saw that. We saw Carmelo out there with Cantor. We saw them playing with Trent. And they kind of alternated between Rocco and Jones at the end.
So okay, I got a couple questions for you.
Hit me up.
All right. So first things first, as soon as Nurk got hurt, it's going to be 8 weeks, about 25 games. We have a 72-game season. It's shortened because of COVID. Do you think the Blazers make a trade or try to sign a center to fill in because we can't use Giles for 25 minutes a game? Do we sign or trade for somebody?
I think they pick somebody up. They still have the 2.8, million exception it is. I want to say that's what it is. I'd have to do the research on it again.
Yeah, it is.
I do believe that's what they have, and I do believe you could go out and get probably a defensive-minded center to play the minutes that Cantor can't play. I would be mad at like Mahinmi. I think Mahinmi. I don't remember how to say his name.
Yeah, so he's a free agent, so we could technically just sign him off the street if we want.
I could see him coming in. I think he's very defensive-minded. He's a good rebounding center. You don't want somebody to come in and you're not going to expect them to be a major part of your offense or anything, but just somebody to clog up, get rebounds, and help defend, especially in the second unit where we're already lacking the defense. You've taken Gary Trent out of there now. And once Rodney Hood just really starts to erupt and play good basketball, you're going to be even worse off than you were before with your defense. So I would like to see a defensive-minded center. I can see a trade. I just don't know what you're going to give up at this point unless you move Collins or Anthony. People are talking about a trade, but who are you bringing back? Are you going after a guy like Whiteside on his contract, just giving the Kings some money and say, hey, we'll take it back. He knows our system. He can come in for us because he started for us last year, and you keep Cantor on the bench. I've heard it a lot. It's definitely an option. I just feel like they're not going to want to give up assets where they can get a reliable enough center to come in off the free agents. And
it doesn't make sense. I mean, unless there's some young guy that we just don't really know a lot about, for example, like Mo Bamba or somebody who's not playing a lot of minutes, the team is fine to cut ties with them and Neil can get them for like some second round pick. But the problem is we've given up a lot of draft capital for the next 2 or 3 years. So you can't slap a Band-Aid on this team by using more of your assets. So I don't know, honestly. I'd love to see a trade to bring in a defensive guy, but I think it's more likely we just sign someone off the street like Mahinmi, just to fill in for a little bit, just a body off the street.
Right. If we make a trade, I mean, the targets you're going to look at are the guys that are making, I don't know, anywhere from $3 to $6 million a year, like the Mamba, or he's making what, $5 mil? So
yeah, he's in the exception range.
Right. You give him back Zach, who's expiring. You take a guy's contract for the next couple of years. It gives some teams some flexibility. And you just absorb that to get a guy to come in and play. That's the only type of trade I see us making. I don't think we're going to see anything outside of that. And again, you don't have to give up much to do it. You're helping that team out by getting money off of their books. I just don't see Neil making the move. I personally think if we do anything, we use the roster spot. We go out and get a backup center for cheap, bring him in, and that's it. And that's what you're going to do.
That's good. Okay, so here's my next question. And I don't know if we haven't even talked about this or broached this subject yet. Is Nurkic the center of the future for the Blazers? So what I mean by this is like his contract decent. We could move him in the offseason. He's starting to have some injury stuff. And honestly, this year, he's just not been playing to his potential. We see nights where he's hot and he's cold, and we see times where he's checked out of games. So my question is, do you want the Blazers to double down with Nurkic as our center, or do you want us to make some potential moves this offseason? Is the injury concerns piling up?
Yeah, but this particular injury I'm not as concerned about because I know it's a broken wrist, but it's because he has active hands, and I think he's actually been playing better. It was
Yeah,
a very unlucky swipe, and we talked about it. This isn't going to affect his conditioning. That was a big thing with some of the previous injuries in the leg,
yes,
especially.
that's
It's
true.
hard to work out when you have those. You can't go do certain things. You can do rehab,
Yeah,
but now he's going to be able to keep in shape. He'll be able to wrap the hand up. He'll still be able to do any of the running and stuff that he's going to need to do. He'll probably be able to go into practice and still
probably.
do the motions and run and stay with the team and continue to keep up with that.
Yeah,
Obviously, he's not playing basketball, and he didn't play basketball for us last year before the bubble. Yeah, you get a little concerned about the injuries, sure. I still think he's the center of our future. I think it's hard to get a guy that's that big, that is so good in the pick and roll, who can pass the way he can pass. He's at a reasonable contract. He has the chemistry and the relationship with our star players.
true.
You take all that into consideration, it's going to be hard to not bring him back and continue to extend him for another contract. He's young. I just think unless you can find another guy that can pass, another big that can really orchestrate a pass off of that screen, when they pass him the ball and go around, you watch him hit these passes on the cutters
Yes.
after he makes that pick and roll, and the way he can roll to the rim, and he's really gotten faster. We've seen it the last couple of weeks, and really this last week before he got hurt, hustling, chasing balls down the court off of a tip, or he'll swipe and get a steal, and that's the type of stuff that we weren't seeing before, that we were really just starting to see again. And I
Yeah,
think you put that into consideration. Who are you going to bring in? Like, what are you going to do? You're going to try to
yeah,
draft a center? We always draft too high. We're not going to get a top center in the draft. It's just not going to happen. So then you look at trades. Most teams aren't going to trade you a center that plays like that. You're not going to go out there and just get a Jokic
yep,
or a Draymond Green for nothing. And then you do get a guy like that. You're talking about contracts. And the thing with Nurk is he's a cheap contract
yep,
uh, for a big that can do what he can do. If you're going to go out and get a power forward or a center, and you're going to try to focus your attention on a new big, that's a guy you're probably going to have to pay if you're really getting somebody better than Nurk, unless you just happen to get a steal and get a kid who's young that somebody gives up on, kind of like the Nuggets did with Nurk.
yep,
But I just don't see a world right now with this team, with the contracts of
yeah,
CJ and Dame, that you can really afford to go out and get a guy unless you
sure.
really trade CJ and then go bring in a big that somebody doesn't think they'll be able to re-sign, or you get lucky in the market like that.
Yeah. I think, like you said, I think you hit on it really well. The money and the chemistry is right. We know what he's capable of. We know he can do. The thing about Nurk is he can do almost everything. He can bang with any center in the league. He's a great passer. He sets good screens. I think that people want a center that can do a lot, but I mean, maybe that's just not possible for us because Dame and CJ are getting their shots. Melo's getting his shots. We're not going to have a center who can drop 25 or 30 like an Anthony Davis. And those guys don't grow on trees. So maybe you just stick with Nurk and keep your money light in the front court for your back court to
I
keep
think
getting paid.
I think you continue to get a guy like Rocco or Chief, a
Yeah,
longer, really more of a small forward that's a little bit bigger and lengthier that can come in and play your forward. If you go a little smaller, a guy that's not going to disrupt what Nurk can do, that's not going to get in his way down low, that can go out and hit shots and kind of let Nurk be that guy in the middle.
yeah,
And I just think that's the only thing you can do is if you're going to get a power forward and you bring it back in and you get rid of Nurk for that. I just don't think you make that kind of a move yet. I think
sure.
the injuries aside, he shows you flashes of that Bosnian beast and Nurkic fever and all these great things. He's earned those nicknames because of his play when he's on and when he's healthy.
Yep.
And just with his age alone and the contract, and again, talk about that relationship with Dame and CJ, knows where to be. He's always in the pick and roll game. We saw where we are without Nurk, and we've seen the kind of team we can be with him. And yeah, Cantor is serviceable for what he is. But we tried to go get a guy like Whiteside, a true center that blocks shots and rebounds. And he's a $20 million guy. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only type of guy you're going to be able to get. I don't know. Maybe fans have a different perspective of this, but
No.
personally, I don't see anybody else that really fits the bill unless you get lucky on a younger guy, either by draft or just somebody tossing away a trade asset.
Yeah. I don't see it right now. I think we just stick it out. And I think that this year will be kind of telling to see what happens. Maybe we re-sign Zach for cheap. I don't know. And give him another crack at some decent front court minutes. I don't know, but
I hope not.
I hope not too.
I'm over Collins, man. I'm just
People think Nurkic is injury prone. Holy cow.
Yeah, well, at least Nurkic is fine when he's out there. Like Collins is perfectly healthy for stretches, and no, thank you.
Yeah. What else you got, man?
I appreciate it. Well, I do kind of have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's the injury and he's coming back from it,
Mm.
but do you really think that Hood is going to start to carve out a big role on this team? I mean, we talked about how we're kind of disappointed with them. Do you
Yeah,
think it's injury? Do you think he's just lost confidence? And do you think he's worth the $9 million a year that we're about to pay him?
it's a good question. So, okay, I think Rodney Hood looked a lot better in this last game. He had a lot more bounce. He was getting really high on his jumps. He went up and got a big rebound, and his shooting looked a lot more fluid. If you're talking about him carving out a big role, the main way that Hoodie could carve out a big role is becoming a very offensive hub in the second unit. He's got to play make. He's got to dominate on the block, and he's got to be a lot better on offense. The thing about Hood is he's not just a spot up shooter. He's a plug-in scorer, so he should be able to do more offensively. I'm thinking the CJ injury over the next 2 weeks will give us an idea of whether or not he's back or not, and he's going to be able to earn it. But I do think he's worth it. I think he's worth the money right now, and I think he's going to do it if we can remain patient. Does that make sense?
It does. I think he needs to get some confidence, and I think he
Yes.
just hasn't found his role. We talked about Trent and Carmelo really being the two guys in the second unit. That I just feel like he hasn't had enough touches because there aren't touches for him.
Right.
It's going to those two guys consistently, and I think that's taken away from his confidence a little bit. He's not getting the minutes because they are working him back in from the injury, and when he is getting his minutes, he's not being utilized because
Mm-mm.
it's just not how the offense is flowing. And I think in his head, you guys need touches. We've talked about it with
Yes.
Nurk. Like the more he gets involved, especially early, the better he gets long run. The energy just goes up, and I think you talked about it. You hit the nail right on the head there. It's with Trent starting and Cantor starting, and it was really just him and Mello in that second unit with a little bit of Anthony and Giles and those guys. But he kind of became the focal point. He kind of got that run that you need him to do, and I think you see the energy go up with him when you're told that, hey, you're going to go out there, it's going to go through you, you need to be involved, we're going to use you.
Mhm.
You kind of get excited. I think there's just a different energy level that he brings, and the next couple of weeks or however long CJ out is going to be very telling for his
Yep.
confidence, what we can expect from him. I still weary about the contract. You're paying him starter money to not have him start,
Yep.
which means he really needs to be that Lou Williams role. He needs to come in on
He does.
offense with that 10 to 15 a night. He needs to be right there with Carmelo,
Yes.
kind of dominating these other guards and wings in the second unit. And I haven't seen it. A lot of it's been the explosiveness, and I think we talk about the injury. So I just curious what you thought about that. To
Yeah.
me, I'm losing faith. I'll admit it. I'm losing faith fast. I know
Sure.
that we need to be patient and trying to be patient, but I just haven't seen enough of him when he's been out there. When Stotts feels he's healthy enough to go to really see, yeah, you know what, 9 million, let's do this. It's just the contract as far as being deserving of it. I don't know. He's playing on the bench. He's playing like an average bench player. He just
Yep.
doesn't seem like that kind of money to me. They paid him for a reason. Also, it's got to be patient.
Yeah. I think sometimes Portland gets these guys and we kind of they overperform in a way for us because that's what happens, right? Everybody overperforms in Portland because we have these great guards and we have a good chemistry and we have an amazing leader in Dame. And Rodney had great confidence before that Achilles popped.
Yeah.
He was looking like, I mean, he looked like a legit could be a starting guard in the league. He looked like he could start or be a team sixth man. So I just think we got to be patient. I think that this injury, even like Wes Matthews, the year after he popped his Achilles and he was signed with Dallas, he didn't look right for like a year and a half. And there's gonna be times where Rodney just doesn't look right, like we talked about at the beginning of the pod, and that's okay. We'll just let him play, and if he can play through it and work through it and get that confidence back, then we'll have to be patient. If he can't, then yeah, we'll have to look at what we're gonna do at that point.
Sounds good. So, real quick before we go, you want to just touch on the upcoming games? We talked about it right before we started this about how easy this stretch is, right?
Yeah, so I want to pull up the schedule because they're all at home. So let me get that in front of me. So let's see. The other thing is with them being at home, I know it's not like a huge advantage, but I thought, oh man, this could be a big run. So we've won 3 out of the last 4 with our only loss being the Pacers. We play the Spurs, Grizzlies again on a not a back to back, but 2 and 3 nights. We play the Knicks and the Thunder, and then you and I will recap after the Knicks because that's Sunday.
Yeah. So, wow.
4 easy games: Spurs, Grizzlies, Knicks.
And they just got Morant back. So, he's already feeling antsy to get back out there. And Grizzlies are one of those weird teams that really, until the bubble, just had our number last year. Granted, they had Jones and
So with that stretch, you take 3-1, or do you want 4-0 for sure?
Again, playing the same team back to back, well, essentially back to back, 2 times in the same week is always just hard. We're going to see it a lot this year with the COVID situation. They're going to try to schedule these teams to stay in town or in the same area, and you're going to see a lot of this back to back.
Yep.
It worries me. They're a physical team. Valanciunas has always had our number. We have no Nurk, so
yeah.
But again, I just feel like they're one of those teams that you have to take advantage of. The Knicks, hot and cold. Julius Randle has been a Blazer killer. Now he's an everybody killer this year. The guy deserves to be an all-star.
He's amazing.
The Knicks are in a better spot come all-star time as far as playoff meeting. Yeah. He might even get that nod. So he's a guy you can really want to watch out for. But Spurs, I mean,
there's a lot of team
think that their wing position, DeRozan, there's a lot of guys there that Keldon Johnson's been a stud this year for them. So they got a lot of these young wings that are going to be kind of hard to play with, but not a lot of shooting, especially not from the perimeter. Their bench guys can come in and get hot, but they're not a great three-point shooting team. With DeRozan and LaMarcus aren't going to go out there and shoot threes.
Right.
So if you can just kind of hold things in play, they're one of those Western teams you want to take advantage of. You want to beat because they're kind of in the end of that 7-8 seed. Yeah, I would think 3-1. I think the loss would potentially, honestly, I think the loss comes to Memphis. I think you lose one of those, probably the second game.
Probably.
That worries me a little bit without CJ to kind of continue to keep up with them. But this stretch is just, it's so easy. I know it seems like we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but you got to take advantage of these games. It's a weaker team that really, if you're going to put yourself up in the top 5 teams of the West right now, especially with the injuries where you're grinding through, these are the stretches you have to win.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. I think 3-1 is what we're looking for realistically. 4-0 would be great, but let's just live in the 3-1 zone like we did this week and accept one loss is okay when you play all the time.
Even 2-2. We talked about it. Every time we do this podcast, if we can say, hey, we were 500 this week.
Yep.
You're not going to be mad at that.
Yep. Well, I mean, we've been doing a really good job on social. So if people aren't following us, please follow on socials. We're going to try. I'm doing the Twitter mostly, and then you do a lot of the Facebook stuff, especially on game days. We have keys to the game, and you can read what we're looking for going into games. So you can read about good players on the other team and what we're looking for, whether it be, perimeter defense or in the paint. We got to win the paint battle, whatever we feel is good. And we're trying to keep up with those. So please keep following.
Yeah, like I said, we get to on the Facebook page, get us to 100 likes and 100 followers, respectively. We're going to give out some free stuff. Really, if you guys follow us on Facebook, if you watch this podcast, you have a Twitter, follow us on there, help us out. And we're going to continue to try to be just more up to date. And again, continue to try to engage with you guys. We hope to get some more questions for these podcasts. We can answer your guys' questions. But we appreciate any of the support you guys give us so far. And we're going to continue to keep this going. And it's a weird, crazy year with COVID. Blaze has been fortunate to have any postponements yet, and we're going to keep following everything that happens with the team.
God. Yeah, man, it's been fun. It's been kind of a fun year, and every game we're frisky, but it's been an interesting ride.
The year of the 16-point comebacks.
Let's hope that stops soon.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, Ben, it's been a pleasure. I will talk to you next week, and thanks again, everybody, for listening.
We're out.